Well, thanks so much for spending your valuable time joining us here today. I'm your host, as always, Cindy Watson, and today I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Martin Moore-Ede, and we're going to be talking about negotiating past harmful light, which may sound like an unusual topic, but probably a pretty important one. And my guess is you don't know a lot about it. So welcome, Martin. It's great to have you here.
Glad to be with you, Cindy. Look forward to the conversation.
Yes, likewise. And I've even got my pad and pen here. I'm going to be taking notes myself. I've got loads to learn. And for those of you who don't know him, Dr. Moore-Ede has been a leading expert on circadian clocks and their regulation by light. As a professor at Harvard Medical School, he led the team that located the biological clock in the human brain that controls the timing of sleep and wake. And as a founder of the global consulting firm CIRCADIAN, he pioneered technologies to help people safely work around the clock. And I know reading some of his stuff, I was like scratching my brain, realizing the impact that I've had, especially when I think of the 30 years in the law office and all of the work that I do at a computer with very little attention, frankly, to the lights and what impact they may be having. So Martin, why don't we start by talking about some of the problems around sort of LED and blue lights, and then we can talk about some of the solutions. I understand that there was a group of like 248 or something leading scientists that issued a warning about the harmful health effects of blue-rich LED light at night. And I've heard little snippets of it, but confess I don't know much. So why is that? Why did all of these leading experts come to that conclusion that this was a harmful thing we were exposing ourselves to?
Well, the story really starts in earnest 20 years ago when a lot of evidence started coming together about the people who were working at night or in the evening hours were getting way more breast cancer, 50% more breast cancer. So nurses who are working the night shift, young nurses, get 50% more breast cancer than those working day shifts. That was one finding. Another finding that came out was that obesity and diabetes was higher in people exposed to light. And that is sort of problematic because we rely on so much on people like nurses or like people in factories and in other businesses to run 24/7. What can we do about it? And that was one of the questions that I started to look at.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that it is not just white light, it's actually one part of the spectrum. Light is made of a spectrum. We only see it really with the rainbow and when the sunlight hits the raindrops, or we see it, we've got a crystal vase and the sun hits it, and you see the beautiful spectrum with the violet, the blue, the greens, the yellows, the reds, and everything else. That's what light is made of, and it turns out one part of it, this the blue part, is absolutely critical to our health. And the problem with the LEDs, to get to it, is they pump out a lot of that blue when they shouldn't. And the nutshell of the story is you need as much blue-rich light during the day as you can, because that tells the body it's daytime, but you need to have zero blue at night. And that never was a problem in the old days with candles and wood fires, because there's no blue in candles and wood fires. They just don't need that blue light. But the LEDs that we have, because of energy efficiency, are particularly strong in emitting blue light. And they're causing devastation to people's health and shortening lifespans and increasing mental illness and so forth. So we can dig into that, but basically the nub of the story is the LEDs, you think they're useful, you think they're energy efficient, they are, they produce white light, that's great, you can see by them, but light has another very important feature, which is a signal that ensures our health.
Okay. And like, what kind of lights are we talking about here? Like, as soon as you'd said about night, I'm thinking, okay, a lot of people, myself sometimes included, are watching TV right up until bedtime or working on our computers. Certainly my kids are all on their cell phones ad nauseum right up until the last dying breath before they fall asleep. Are these, the lights that we're exposed to here, some of these dangerous lights, or?
Yes, in fact, LEDs are the fundamental thing behind not only light bulbs these days. In fact, all the other light bulbs are banned since August 1st last year. You can't buy incandescents, you can't buy halogens, you can no longer buy fluorescents in many places. So these LEDs are ubiquitous for lighting light bulbs and light fixtures, but they also are part of your computer screen. So they basically, it's blue-rich light that's coming out of the computer screens you and I are looking at right now. It comes out of cell phones, iPhones, your mobile devices, your pad, your display pads and anything of that sort. And it's all done unthinkingly. It's not a devious plan to hurt us.
Yeah.
It was done, it was done to solve an energy problem, but with a big, big downside that is really now. And so the 250 scientists, or 248 scientists, to be really precise, who came out wanted the world to know this because the science is totally solid and totally convinced, but the general public doesn't have a clue. And so it's really a way of saying, look, this science is not just some wild, wacky scientist coming up with an idea or just one paper, to scare people.
Yeah.
This is a science of over 10,000 scientific studies and books and everything else.
Wow. Well, and that's when I read some of your stuff, it's why one of the reasons, obviously, I really felt very strongly about having you come and share this information with our audience, because we are inundated. And you just said something I really wanted to pick up on, because I'd heard about that banning of incandescent and halogen and fluorescent lights. But I mean, if we're getting this overwhelming evidence from the scientific community that LED lights are so dangerous, and yet they're so heavily promoted and the others are being banned, why is that?
Because it's part of the big energy climate solution. And we're all in favor of getting on top of this global warming and climate change situation. And energy conservation is part of it. And certainly electric lights are a lot of, the electricity we use is for lighting as well as for screens. But the problem is that it sounds like a wonderful solution because the amount of light produced per watt of electricity is 10 times greater. The more light you can produce for the same watt of electricity, or to put it another way, 1/10 of the energy is needed to produce light. Sounds like a great solution. So it's caught up with a huge government promotion, government regulations, everything else banning other types of lighting. And it sounds great until you realize it's a problem, and it's a problem in the evening hours. We need to sort of stress that, because the blue component that's causing the problem that's coming out of these LEDs is fine during the day. In fact, we need to see blue light during the day. As soon as the sun sets, however, our bodies can never get into our recovery phase and our sleeping phase properly, and our healing phase and cancer prevention phase, which is in the nighttime, when you have blue light in the mix. And
we are so short-sighted as humans, are we not? Like, I mean, often with all of the focus and best intentions to solve one problem, we don't consider the ripple effects of it. So why don't you take us back a moment and tell us a little bit about circadian clocks? Like, what are they? How many do we have?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, circadian clocks are the timing systems of the body that keeps us in sync, and always have throughout the evolution, throughout the animal kingdom, plant kingdom, to keep us in sync with day and night. They enable us to know when dawn is going to occur and allow the systems of the body to be ready for dawn, and enable us to get back to our homes. These animals get back to their homes before dusk, so they're not victims of their predators. It's basically, it's us attuned with Mother Nature and synchronizing to it. Some animals are nocturnal, more actually are nocturnal than diurnal, daytime active, but animals find their place. And it's fundamental throughout living creatures. That system is, interestingly, and I was involved in discovering the clock in the human brain, but it's a clock that actually in the brain that keeps us synchronized, that's linked to the light coming in through the eyes, detected by blue detecting receptors in the eye, specialized ones, sending the message to the clock, keeping it in sync. But that's not the only clock. There are clocks in virtually every cell of the body, every organ of the body. And when we now know a whole lot about how these clocks all need to beat in sync with each other. And hormones like cortisol and melatonin are part of the signal that's sent down to keep everything. It's like the conductor of the orchestra. We have a clock, a master clock in the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain, which is causing, called the SCN just for short. The SCN is the master orchestra, leader of the orchestra, but you've got to have all these other rhythms in sync. And when they get out of sync with each other, when you get confusing light signals and everything else, then you get serious ill health. Cancer tumors grow much faster. People get diabetic rapidly. Heart disease is more common. Depression, anxiety is more common. So keeping us in sync with Mother Nature is absolutely key. And of course, what have we done? We've created a world where we spend 90+% of our time indoors. Living in very twilight conditions, because the light indoors is 100 to 1,000 times less bright than light outside. So we're living in this world where we're in constant twilight with way too little light during the day and way too much light in the evening hours, as compared to, the first 10,000 generations of humans, ever since humans walked on this earth. It's only in the last 3-4 generations that we've now sort of progressively moved indoors in living in twilight with the wrong light signals at the wrong time of day.
Yeah, and we have all of these advancements, and sometimes we don't think about the consequences. So you've mentioned a few for us, Martin, but what happens when our circadian clocks get out of sync? And I mean, you talked about breast cancer, and I want to circle back to that in a bit, and depression and anxiety is this why we're seeing such an increase in insomnia, chronic sleep deprivation, anxiety, depression?
Absolutely, very big part of it. And what's interesting, they're now just recently coming out with some very large studies with 80,000 plus people looking at how much light are they seeing, for example, during the nighttime hours. And the people have their lights on in the bedroom at night. If you look at a group of 60-year-olds and you look at and you then follow their lifespan for the next 10 years, how many of them die within the next 10 years? They're dying 30% faster, people who have the lights on in their bedrooms at night. They have twice the amount of diabetes, twice the amount of heart disease, twice the amount of diabetes in those people. Yeah. The other side of the coin, that's people having too much light at night. The other side of the coin, if you look at people of how much daylight do you see, we've all heard about the concerns about skin cancer, getting exposed to too much sun and all the rest of it. And then, yes, there is some increased risk, but the risk is far greater from staying indoors. So staying indoors and not getting outside each day is equivalent risk of smoking. It's that scale of magnitude of smokers versus non-smokers. It's a huge risk. So too little light during the day, too much light at night, particularly in the nighttime, in the sleeping hours, really is causing huge disruptions and is linked to now multiple diseases and health problems and shortening lifespans.
And I'm just thinking, as you're saying it, like COVID must have made this exponentially more problematic with people staying at home, both during the pandemic and now with a lot more people choosing to work at home full time and around the clock. And I'm gonna have to rethink how I practice as well. So let's talk about, you've mentioned breast cancer a couple of times, and that really caught my interest. Let's talk about that connection between breast cancer and lighting.
Well, in a nutshell, women who've never seen electric light rarely get breast cancer. Wow. So, smoking, most lung cancers are caused by people who smoke, but it's about 20% of people who get lung cancer without being smokers. It's a similar type of thing as that. So basically, if you go and look in who are the women who never seen electric light, well, there are a lot of women still in parts of the world where they're electrified, particularly in Africa and places like that. Very little electrification, very low rates of breast cancer, about 20 cases per 100,000 women per year. Wow. But if you look at the electrified parts of the world, Western Europe, North America, there the rates are 100, 110, 5 times greater rates of breast cancer in those groups. And you say, well, maybe that's other things in the environment. But one of the telling things is women who've been blind since an early age and hence haven't seen light also don't get breast cancer. Wow. So that answers your question. They've got all the same chemicals and everything else. So, and we know, and we can trace the growth of breast cancer. Used to be a very rare disease back in the early days, early part of the century, last century. And actually, once blue-rich lights came in, the first blue-rich lights weren't the LEDs because they weren't invented until, or really didn't really start going until about 2012. We started getting a lot of LEDs. Were actually the blue-rich fluorescent lights that came in the 1970s. And between 1970, when we started introducing these, the 60s and 70s, introducing these blue-rich LED lights, breast cancer rates quadrupled in the next 40 years. Wow. Just as a result of that exposure, as part of that exposure. So that's the issue. We've got something and we understand, now we understand it, we can actually fix it. We can actually build lights that are zero blue for nighttime use. They are still provide nice, comfortable yellowish white light. But so the solutions are there, and the challenge is getting people to ask for it because it's been invented. I actually held the original patents of it. We invented the solution
Yeah.
I've got it licensed to some of the major lighting companies in the world, and they're coming out now. But at the same time, the problem is, as you know, in business, in any product, you've got to have the demand. The consumer's going to be demanding it, and you've got to have supply, right? And so the consumer's not buying it. The lighting companies are a little incentive to build it and sell it, and vice. But on the other hand, it works both ways. So it's getting the word out is critical, but the solution now is readily available, and it's the simplest. It's, you know, blue at night is an environmental pollutant, but it's the simplest pollutant to get rid of. Think about PFAS chemicals and all those other things. Very hard to get rid of those forever chemicals out of the word toxic things in our environment, plastics, everything else. Very hard to deal with it. But this is simple. Just change the light bulb.
Yeah. And let's talk about that for a sec, because I want people to feel like they can walk away with some sort of concrete tips on what they should be asking for. Because I know myself, I wouldn't have a clue to go in. And it is one of those catch-22s where, you know, they're not being produced, so people aren't experiencing them, and people don't even know what to ask for because they're not aware of the problem. They're not available. So how can we know, like, what light bulbs, what fixtures to buy to help our circadian clocks? What should people be asking for? What should we be demanding?
Yeah, first of all, look for what's called circadian lighting. So it's lighting that's designed. Now, unfortunately, there is a lot of lighting out there that claims to be circadian. This placebo. They change the color with the time of day. You should actually look for blue content. So, you know, for example, one company that produces is a company called Chorus, Korrus, and they have a couple of brands. One is Lumium, Lumium, which is coming out with light fixtures for offices and everything like that, which automatically change from max blue during the day to zero blue at night. That's what you're looking for. The key is, you know, the key spec, as it were, to ask for is the light should have less than 2% blue content when used at night, and more than 20% blue content when used during the day. That's the key spec. Okay. If you can find lights that do that, and there are a number of vendors that do lights like that, then you've got something lights that are actually going to be healthy and are proven to actually reverse the conditions. I mean, for example, we can make people diabetic by putting them under regular LED light all night, and they get their insulin resistance goes up, their glucose levels go up, they get pre-diabetes just in one night exposure. We can reverse all that by using lights that have got zero blue content.
So there's the two elements we need to be looking for. And one is we need lights where they have the different levels of blue that switch from day to nighttime, which I suspect they don't all do. So for our listeners out there, be sure to be asking for that and make sure you know what those percentages are, those acceptable percentages for each of those. Now, we're hearing a lot about the blue blocking glasses. I know I think I've got a pair of my here that I just sort of clip on. I'm not even sure if they... I know you've written a lot about
why don't you put them on? I can tell you whether they're going to be effective or not.
Do you know what's funny? I just looked, my case is empty here. I don't even know where the darn thing's gone. So I'm going to have to find what the heck happened to them here. So
to put you on the spot there. Now, basically, many blue blocking glasses do no benefit whatsoever because they block the wrong blue.
Oh dear.
Blue is we talk about blue. It's a broad range of colors in blue.
Yeah.
You've got violet blues down at one end, you've got royal dark blues, you've got sky blues, and you've got aquas and things like that, all in the blue family. The blue we need to block is the sky blue light. It's interesting, it's the color of the natural sky that is the key color, which is interesting. And I'll tell you why it's even more interesting when we talk about the ocean and marine life. I'll come back to that one. Yeah. But essentially, that's the one to block. But most glasses are blocking really more like the violet blue light down at the other, the close to the violet end of the spectrum. Those look more attractive. Those ones you can get a blue tint, but they're pretty clear. They look the most really attractive ones, and the big companies like SLR, all the lighting brands sell those blue blockers. But they do absolutely nothing for your circadian health, for blocking the sky blue light at night. Yeah. Now, why I asked you to put them on, if you had them, was the glasses that are effective are going to look rather yellow-orange in color, because they're going to be taking out, that's what happens when you take the blue out of the spectrum. So you can tell by looking at the glasses, are they yellow-orange in color, or are they relatively clear? And the clear ones are the ones to avoid. They really do no good at all.
Okay, well, that's good to know because mine came with 2 sets of lenses that you clip on. I was just going to ask you that because one of them are very orange in color and the other ones are sort of a bluer actual tint to them. So it's
Yeah,
the orange
yeah.
ones I should be using
The
then.
orange ones in the evening that you want to see. And the other thing is, we're trying to see as much blue during the day. So don't wear blue blocking glasses during the daytime.
Oops.
That's totally the wrong way around, right?
I'm so guilty.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, it's good to know. Good to know. Now let's talk a bit about negotiation around lights. You know,
So,
we're subject to lights all day, obviously. I assume some of our listeners are probably thinking, well, I really don't have a lot of control over that. So how can we be more proactive in asking for healthy circadian lighting in the spaces where we and our families are spending time in the schools, in our workplaces? What do you suggest around that?
well, there are 3 areas that really different strategies for them, right? One is indoors in your own home environment. There you're the boss.
Yes.
There you can, the negotiation maybe with your family, but not much more than that, right? And there you can choose the lighting that in fact is healthy for you and you have justification and control over it.
Yeah.
But then there are all the spaces that you don't control, the schools, the hospitals, the places you go to spend your workplace, and so forth. And there, it's very important to understand how lights are bought and sold and who makes the decisions in order to be able to press the right buttons and negotiate for a healthier workplace. So, for example, we're putting lights in a leading hospital in Washington, D.C. right now. They're in the negotiation. Who is the person who's buying the lights? Well, the person who's buying the lights is typically the facilities manager. He's a guy whose task is to get electricity, the cheapest electric bill he can, get lights the cheapest he can. The LEDs are great. They're highly efficient. There's no risk to his career in buying LED lights. But he is clueless about the impact of the health, and he's not particularly motivated for the health of the occupants or the tenants or the patients or whoever else in there. That's not his role. He gets his bonus from energy efficiency, not from health. So you need to start developing allies with people concerned with the health and well-being, not only your fellow people who use the space, but also to manage there's a manager responsible for health and wellness, manager responsible for productivity. And, so what we found is that talking to those people, they suddenly realize, oh my gosh, I can influence the well-being and health of my people. They're going to sleep better at night. They're going to be more productive and alert during the day. They're going to have less absenteeism, less sick leave I'm going to have to deal with. I'm going to save a lot there, the efficiency in my workplace. That's the person. Now that person is gonna, that's where the specs come in, right? If you've got specs, you educate that person to understand you need more than 20% blue, light with more than 20% blue during the day, less than 2% blue at night, or in the evening hours. And then with that person, you go to the facility manager and says, look, we need to address health, and these are the specs. Now, once you've got specs, vendors are not going to be able to cheat on you or give you placebos because those specs ensure that you're not. So that basically that building support with the fellow people who use the space, whether it's fellow users of the library or fellow parents in the school or whatever, dealing with whoever is most concerned with the health and the benefits to people, not just the economics of the electricity bill, and then basically campaigning for it. That's how we're now seeing it put in all sorts of places. We've installed these lights now in wide range of different workplaces now, everything from hospitals, oil refinery control rooms to all sorts of places. And now we're looking at a wide range of places. But that's what you're going to do is get to those people, and it's negotiation and make sure you're armed with the facts and the specs. And then it's really a question of making the case that, okay, they say, well, this is going to cost a bit more than the cheap lights I can buy on the internet or the cheap lights they can ship in from China, LEDs. It's going to cost a bit more. But hey, what's the cost to you of people who've got diabetes? How much does Ozempic cost you? For people who are overweight or have diabetes, $600, $800 a month. Well, making a difference between a light bulb that's only going to be, $30 or whatever.
Brilliant.
It's pretty cheap. No, it's not a $2 light bulb, but the shorts are, the idea is it's going to be so much more effective, and you get so many more benefits in terms of health and productivity and so on. So that's the case that you've got to.
Well, and I love that you've raised the negotiation arguments. I mean, it's so classic because we focus, most people would be inclined who are activists around this to focus on the health issues and doing the right thing. And sadly, in today's world, and whether in the legal profession or in corporate world, so often in retail, it's about that bottom line, So I love that you've raised those really clever negotiating arguments about what's in it for them. Think about the benefits, increased in the benefits cost. Think about the sick time. Think about your productivity when people come in from chronic sleep deprivation, as opposed to that you'll have increased morale, increased productivity, a healthier workforce. I mean, these are clever and accurate arguments to be able to mount in those negotiations.
Right.
So I wanted to really put a pin in that for our listeners. Don't feel like you don't have any clout to be able to come forward. This isn't just an issue about, hey, I want my health taken care of. You can also be really sharing those benefits to the employer, the workplace, the educational system, wherever it is. So I thought that was brilliant. And
Yeah,
in
I
places,
think it's just one more. I think
Yeah.
just to follow up on that point, I always like to use the word weapon. What's in it for me?
yes,
Right? So if you get the weapon, now think who you're talking to.
Yeah.
What's the benefit to them?
Yeah.
That and that you can talk to, because once you're on their wavelength, you can now make the case. But if you just preach at them doing good or health or something, and it's not their bailiwick, it just flies right past them.
Well, I'm really glad you put a pin in that. And again, for our listeners, this applies for this specific issue, which is so interesting to me. And thank you for sharing, Martin, and so important, given the statistics you're sharing are staggering to me. But also that principle about WIFM applies in any of your negotiations. In North America in particular, we really make the mistake about pushing our agenda and talking over the other person to make sure our points are heard. And it is a much more effective form of negotiation to listen and get curious and ask questions, and to be presenting arguments about, as Martin says, what's in it for the other party. Now, Martin, in those places where we just can't change the lights, do you have any suggestions for what are some things we can do in those places? I mean, one presumably is, wearing, an appropriate brand of these. What else would you suggest?
Well, that's the most obvious thing, is using, the glass eyewear. At least you then are in control of the light coming in through your own eyes. You can, find ways to dim light sometimes, but it is more challenging in general spaces.
Yeah.
Now, if you're just dropping by the florist to pick up some flowers, that's not going to do you much harm.
Yeah.
Focus on the places where you or your loved ones are going to spend a lot of time.
Yeah.
The assisted living facility, for example, like where your elderly parents may be, the hospital where a loved one may be, or at the school or the workplace. I think the places where people spend hours of their time, and particularly if they spend evening hours of time, I think that's really the focus place.
Beautiful. Now, tell us a bit about your new book, The Light Doctor. I think your subtitle is The Science and Solutions for Replacing Your Lights Now to Protect Your Health. Tell us a little bit about that book.
Yeah, the light. I wrote The Light Doctor because of this challenge of people just not knowing. I mean, it's actually my wife likes to talk to people and neighbors in the restaurant or wherever else and quiz them. Do they know? And the answer is even really well-educated people do not have a clue.
Yeah.
And it's a foreign subject. I mean, light is something we take for granted. It's just we flick the switch on the wall and that's all we have to worry about. We turn on our computers or our iPhones. We just don't think about it, right?
Yeah.
And light, intrinsically, people think of it as just for vision, right? That's what it is. It's just vision. But there's so much more than that. So the Light Doctor is really telling that story, but telling it to a very general audience and giving both the genesis of the sources of this data and showing where it is. It's not a scientific book. It's written for a general audience. But it does give links to where you can go and actually dig in more if you want to. And it talks about the solutions that are available and where to find them and how to choose them. So far it's on Substack, which is a big site, 20 million readers on Substack. I don't have all 20 million readers, but I have thousands of readers on Substack already on that. But I'm going into a print version this year because so many people being asking for it. But it's
we'll make sure
arm yourself. It's the thing to arm yourself if you're going to make that case. Go into a negotiation informed. It's a readable way to be fully informed when you go into that negotiation.
Yeah, and so important, Martin. Like I thought I knew something about this. I thought I had sort of a higher than average awareness, but the more of your, that I get exposed to reading what you're putting out there, the more, and what you've shared today, as I say, the statistics are just staggering. A lot of the health consequences you're talking about, I had no idea. I had never heard before. So we'll make sure to put the link as well for how they can access it currently, and also be sure to keep us in the loop when the print version comes out. We'll make sure to put the links for that as well. And we'll also throw the links in. And for anybody who wants to even do a deeper dive, Martin has some other best-selling books as well, The Clocks That Time Us and The 24-Hour Society. We'll put the access to those in our show notes for you. So Martin, this has been fabulous. I can't believe how quick our time has gone, and you've packed us in with so much information here. I normally like to end by asking, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've had in your life? Doesn't have to be on this issue at all. An aha moment that had you think about things differently or show up differently.
Well, I think it was it was on this subject, I think, in that when I discovered the biological clock in the human brain, and we were first to show that it was also synchronized by light, didn't even think about the light spectrum. We just thought any light would do. And it wasn't until I was in my office and one of my colleagues, an MD, PhD researcher, Dr. Guerri, walked in and said, "Have you seen this paper from the University of Toronto, where they actually filtered out part of the light spectrum, and they showed that if you filtered out the blue, this problem was solved?" I said, "That's amazing, because you suddenly was a solution. We didn't have, so many people, we can't switch off the lights, we can't stop working at night, but suddenly there was a door there." And that was really the breakthrough. And then the question was, how do we do that? We started off doing it with glasses, blue blocking. That worked well, except there's some challenges with blue blocking glasses. You don't see certain colors on the screen. That could be a problem in certain jobs. And then we went to building lights. But that was the key, to say, light is made, white light that we see, there's not just a color as white.
Yeah.
White is a blend of all the colors of the rainbow. It's not a primary color at all. It is a result of the rainbow. And once you realize that every part of that spectrum has a health benefit. Green, for example, cures migraines. Red, for example, grows hair and heals cells. Violet kills viruses. All those different elements are critical. So seeing light instead of just white light or yellow light, but seeing it as each part of that spectrum has got a health benefit or a health challenge is really the key. To really thinking about light as a health source as opposed to just a vision issue.
Yeah, so exciting. So much potential there, which is very exciting. And I love that it was University of Toronto. U of T was my alma mater. So that's interesting. So where can people learn more about you and what you offer, Dr. Martin Moore-Ede?
Well, my website is thelightdoctor.com. And so that's a source to it. And obviously you can search me on LinkedIn and elsewhere. But we're at the Light Doctor and at the Substack, I'm constantly posting. This is a rapidly moving field. So the mission is not only to get the fundamental word out through the book, but also as new products are getting available, to have people aware of them. Because this is a time we need to make a shift in how we see light.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been super enlightening. No pun intended. It was great to have you here. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much indeed, Cindy.
And for our listeners, there has been so much value here, and it is such an important and underspoken about issue. So please make sure to give the gift of sharing as well. I hope you got value from this episode. Make sure to share it with the people in your life that you care about. Because as I say, if we're not aware, we can't make choices that will help for greater longevity and healthier lifestyles. Definitely worth the effort. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done that already. And before we sign off today, I'd like to share some ways that we can work together. If you're looking to up-level your negotiation skills, I've got everything from online to group to my signature one-on-one and VIP experiences to help you better leverage your innate power to get more of what you want and deserve in life. If that sounds interesting, check out our website at artoffemininenegotiation.com. Make sure to grab a copy of my book, Art of Feminine Negotiation, if you have not done that already. And that is a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and start getting more of what you want and deserve from the boardroom to the bedroom. Until next time, take care.